Hello, I am Ian McDougall, and this is my visual touchpoints presentation for our next motion design project. So, as I had stated in the previous assignment, the audio file that I want to focus more heavily on is the changes necessary, and what I pulled from that file was I leaned a lot more heavily into the natural, conservation, and animal perspective of that than I did on the changing of energy and human aspect of it. Whilst those are still going to be important elements, they're going to take a back seat. As you can kind of see here, I wanted to focus more, when it came to the environment at least, I wanted to focus more on the simple elements of the background, utilizing simple shapes, fewer colors, um, but still colors that would incorporate that natural and lively aspect. Like you can see here on the left, utilizing more browns and greens and blues and whites, whilst having the shapes that you'd see on the right with the simple mountain ranges and the hills and things of that nature. This is just another slide kind of explaining that idea a little bit further. For the trees and the other aspects like bushes and things like that, focusing on simpler shapes, fewer colors, just to get that idea across, whilst having the wildlife take the forefront, being much more lively, more movement incorporated, and brighter colors. And you'll see more of that later in the presentation. Now, I did say that I would still include elements of the change in energy and things like that. And I wanted to be sure to incorporate a difference between the natural and lively element and then this more, I'd say, muted colored, almost depressing side of it. So I wanted to incorporate the older styles of, coal plants and burning fossil fuels and things like that. And I made sure to mostly do that through color. It would share similar simple shapes. However, the color palette would be much more muted, including a lot more, as you can see on this slide, a lot more grays and blacks and almost like a dirty white color, as I wouldn't want it to give that lively feeling that I'd be giving these elements, being, of course, the animals. And an important part of this that I think I should focus on to differentiate it from other projects of a similar variety is I want to focus, as I mentioned, I want to focus on a more conservation element with animals. However, I want to make sure that I'm able to incorporate all different kinds of animals. Often you'll see with conservation, the ones that get the most publications and publicity are often like the cuter ones, the bigger ones. If it's fuzzy and cute, it's going to get a lot more attention than an endangered insect or an endangered reptile, as people won't care as much about those. But I want to make sure that I'm able to incorporate all elements of life as they mentioned in the audio file and the importance that they all take in their roles in the natural world. So incorporating, even if I utilize simpler shapes or simple textures, incorporating things like, different insects, incorporating reptiles, incorporating whatever it may be, just to make sure I'm able to touch on all those different elements of life. There we go. So when it comes to the actual style of it, I'm leaning toward, as I said, utilizing a brighter color palette with simpler shapes, but to give it a little bit more life, I'd maybe include some textures. So as you can see here in the upper left, having this kind of texture on the ground to give it that almost grassy feeling. And for the trees, I'm leaning towards something like this, a bit more of the painted on feeling, especially to differentiate it from some of the more like movement and motion designed animals, having more static trees that would just take up space in the background. However, I could incorporate different styles, for example, having these painted kind of swirled trees or having these more paper textured trees. As I mentioned earlier, the colors I want to utilize are going to be more greens, blues, browns, whites, and I'd want to focus on more earthy tones, a little bit more natural, have them be a bit more muted, but every once in a while, especially when it comes to the wildlife, have that dash of color in there just to make sure it stands out and it seems unique amongst the more muted backgrounds. And an important part, I think, of getting the animals to stand out amongst everything else is making sure that they have the correct movement to them. So I thought these GIFs were a really good representation of that, showing off the different movements for different body types, having things like a rhino creature or a lion or things like that, or like a gorilla. Having those different movements to make sure every animal has their own unique feel and it doesn't all just blend into one mass. I want to make sure all of that stands out on its own and feels like its own unique movement and its own unique part of the environment. For the environment itself, I definitely want to still incorporate movement, but to make sure that the focus doesn't become the environment or the backgrounds, I want to have those movements be subtle and smooth. There would be fewer movements. As you can see here, it's just like a few bushes and some clouds. Here, it's just the swing of the tire swing, a few clouds and some leaves. It's fewer movements, but the movements would be much more fluid, feel a lot more natural, and be much smoother, and overall I would think would fit far better with the topic that I'm going for and the angle that I'm trying to approach said topic from. And that would essentially be the assignment. I want to focus more on, as I said, the natural elements, incorporating for the backgrounds, incorporating less movement but smoother movements, and having the animals and the wildlife really take the forefront of this project and help push it forward.